Well, joining us now to discuss Gaza Phase 2, as well as the state of play with Iran, is our panel for today. Colonel Miri, a senior fellow at the Institute of Counterterrorism, and Asher Friedman, the executive director of the Misgav Institute for National Security. Welcome to both of you to the show. Asher, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on the U.S. pushing forward into Phase 2 in Gaza, as well as inviting Turkey and Qatar to this board of peace?
Well, thank you, Emily. We have to recall that the very first point in President Trump's 20-point plan is that Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone. Now, there are absolutely people on the Board of Peace, on the Executive Committee, who are people who I know personally, who are truly dedicated to Israel's security, to a lasting peace between Israel and Gaza. But the devil, especially dealing with Hamas, is certainly in the details, and how all these various international bodies and boards and committees are going to actually lead to Hamas being disarmed, I think very much remains to be seen.
Colonel Eisen, I want to ask you realistically, what are Israel's options in terms of Phase 2 in Gaza, and how can the risk posed by potential members of this board, such as Turkey and Qatar, can that risk be mitigated by Israel in any way?
Emily, we already accepted Phase 2 when it was signed or presented by President Trump. And I want to remind everybody, what we as if paid is because we got back on October 13th, 2025, 20 live Israeli hostages. And I put that out there because it has to be connected one to the other. For that, and that's the 20 live and the bulk of the dead, and we still have Ran Gvili, who has not been given back, we had to compromise. We did not know the details of the compromise. And as Asher said very clearly, the devil is now in the details. You cannot go in and out of the area which is controlled still by Hamas except through Israel. The map that President Trump put together and posted is the map that goes hand in hand with this board of peace. It includes different lines, that yellow line, and then there's a red line. Israel and the Israeli troops are still sitting in and around the Gaza Strip. You can't go in by air, you can't go in by sea, you certainly cannot go in by land. So how does it actually happen that in this board you have all of these countries that Israel won't allow them in? Because they have to go through us. This has to be coordinated. I truly think, and this is my opinion, I have not sat in the room, not with the Prime Minister, not with President Trump, that the devil in the details has actually, yes, been brought to the table, meaning there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on in Israel right now against what's happening, but I do think that these different aspects were brought up before. I am not surprised that Turkey and Qatar are inside, because at the end, the United States has interests that are not only the security of Israel. I do believe that they strongly believe in that, but that they're also going to bring additional hard-to-swallow elements into the room.
All right, well, I do want to move to discuss a bit more about Iran. Colonel Eisen, let me ask you first. We see U.S. assets being moved to the Middle East, more of them on the way now. Threats from President Trump very much still on the table. Do you think the U.S. will ultimately take action, and what will the objective be for such an operation?
So I'm going to separate that into two, Emily. I'm never willing to give a prediction on what President Trump will or will not do. And that means that they may attack and they may not attack. But I will try and address what would you attack if you attack, because I really don't know to say if they will or not. You need to, at this stage along the way, the threats that have come out very clearly, it has to be against the different regime projects. And that's both the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which Israel attacked quite heavily in June of last year. I remind everybody we had absolute air superiority. You have to, when you attack something like that, you have to take into account what the Iranians will do. So I expect them to go against Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, the air defense, and perhaps some of the missiles that I think that Iran would try to fire against us. But more than that, and Israel did not really do this in June of 2025, neither did the United States, is to go against the symbols that we're seeing right now. It could be against the supreme leader. It could be against not just the symbols themselves, but the different structures in which you house this Islamic regime, the one that makes the decisions that have been so horrific for the Iranian people, Persian-speaking people, over I'm going to say the last 40 years or 45 years, and certainly over the last few years, where they have no economy, no electricity, no water, and they have no future, and they're under sanctions. And I think that those different aspects would be attacked by the United States if they choose to do so.
Now, Asher, the New York Times cited a U.S. official who claimed that the strike was delayed because Israel asked the president to delay. There's also been a lot of rumors floating around that Israel perhaps was militarily unprepared to deal with the backlash of an extended fight with the Islamic Republic. Is there any truth in this, in what you're hearing?
Well, I find it hard to believe. First of all, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has defined defeating Iran as one of the primary goals of his historic legacy. Secondly, as Colonel Eisen correctly pointed out, we had achieved near total air superiority over Iran, and Iran has not yet been able to rebuild those air defenses, the sophisticated air defenses that it once had. So Israel could still more or less control the airspace. Now the question, have we fully refilled the arsenal, the batteries of anti-missile missiles? That's a question that remains, but it's very hard for me to believe that Israel would have dissuaded President Trump for that reason. It's possible that Israel communicated a message that we should let the protests play themselves out and a strike might be counterproductive. I think you could have an argument about that. We have to recall that two very significant things. One is that for the first time, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have explicitly declared regime change as the goal. And because, as Colonel Eisen pointed out, the economic drivers of which were the base of the protests, the declining real, the skyrocketing prices for food, the water shortages, this isn't over. At very best, the regime may have temporarily suppressed the protests. We're going to see again and again and again protests. And I do hope that President Trump, together with its allies, will take action.
Now, I do want to ask both of you, before we do have to wrap up, we'll start with you, Colonel Eisen. How likely do you think the fall of the Islamic Republic is at this point, based on what we're seeing in the streets right now?
I think that when we're looking at Iran of 2026, we're already hearing voices. I'm not going to say post-regime, but I do have an expectation that it cannot continue the way it is now. Now, a regime fall does not mean, and here comes the liberal democracy. But I do think that there's going to be a change in 2026. By the way, that could be a change for the worse for the Iranian people. It can be worse than it is now. It can be a hardcore Iranian Revolutionary Guard dictatorship, very harsh reality, which is not exactly what exists there right now with all of the horrible things going on. So I do expect a change. I absolutely think that if there is an attack, it would definitely make it even more definitive, but I can't say that the result of that will necessarily be what we all want to hope, which is a better future for the Iranian Persian people.
All right, Asher, and your take. Do you think we'll see the end of the Islamic Republic in the near future?
I think the Islamic Republic has no answers to the economic crises, and which are probably impacting also the 5 million besieged. They're also going home and they don't have enough money for food, and when they turn on the faucet, the water isn't coming out. But I do think very much, look, we all hope to see Iran integrated into the region, to see warm, open relations between Israel and Iran, to have Iran part of the Abraham Accords or the Cyrus Accords, various other very welcome initiatives. But it does very much remain to be seen whether those calling for democracy or for constitutional monarchy, and also there are different views among the demonstrators, what and again they would like that we see a liberal, tolerant, open Iran and not another military dictatorship, which I agree is a possibility.
And just before I let you go, I do want to ask you, Colonel Eisen, I want to follow up with one more brief question. In terms of Israel's interest, I mean, what do you believe is in the interest of Israel? A regime change now? Because we've seen some leaders expressing support already for regime change. We know Prime Minister Netanyahu has made that kind of an objective in the past, but you mentioned it could get worse. So what's in Israel's interest today?
I think it could get worse for the Iranian people. I don't necessarily think it would get worse for us. I think that the Islamic regime and its backing of the proxies in the area, a change of regime is better for Israel. If it deteriorates there into a civil war, if we see there something which is worse for the Iranians, my heart can go out to them, but that's not necessarily worse for Israel.
All right, understood. I want to thank our panel for joining us today, Colonel Miri Eisen and Asher Friedman. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.